They said the Ulas family belonged to the past, but their courage, their love, and their unbroken will to rise made them the true definition of evolution, not of the body, but of the human spirit. The story begins in southern Turkey, in a region where the land is as hard as the lives it holds. Between the cracked hills and olive trees lies a small, dust-colored village called Hatay. It is the kind of place where the sun rises without hurry and sets without witness. The world rarely visits here, and when it does, it often leaves without understanding what it saw. In one of the narrow, uneven streets stood a modest home built of clay, patched with tin and love. It belonged to Risit and Hattis Ulas, a humble farming couple who had never traveled beyond the neighboring village. Their world was measured in harvests, in prayers whispered under the night sky, and in the laughter of their many children. They were a family like any other until one quiet dawn changed everything. Hattis remembered it vividly for the rest of her life. Her daughter, Sermon, was nearly 2 years old. Unlike her older siblings, she had not yet taken her first step. But that morning, when Hattis entered the room, she found the child moving, not standing, but crawling swiftly on all fours, her back arched, her palms pressed flat against the dirt floor. Hattis smiled at first. She's playing, she thought. But days turned into weeks, and Sermon did not rise. She did not toddle as other children did. When her son Hussein followed the same path a year later, Hattis's smile faded into quiet fear. Doctors were far away. Hospitals were words, not places. The midwife told her, maybe it is the will of God. Risit, a man of few words, looked at his wife one night and said, they will grow strong in their own way. And so life continued with a small, aching mystery living inside their home. By the late 1970s, the Ulas family had grown large, 19 children in total, though not all would survive infancy. Among them, 5 shared the same unexplainable condition. They could not walk upright. Their names became whispered in the village: Safet, Sermon, Hussein, Sadiai, and Mustafa. From a distance, they looked like any other children: curious eyes, wide smiles, laughter that filled the courtyard. But when they moved, they bent low, walking on their hands and feet in a motion both human and haunting. It was not clumsy. It was natural, as if their bodies had remembered something ancient, something buried deep in the bones of mankind. The villagers called them the children who walk backward. Children pointed and laughed. Elders shook their heads. Perhaps the mother angered God. Some whispered. Others warned their children not to go near them, fearing the condition was contagious. Yet within the walls of the Ulas' home, love never left. Hattis bathed them gently, brushing dust from their knees. She tied rags around their hands to protect the skin from stones. At night, she wept quietly into her shawl, praying for a miracle she could not name. Risit worked in the fields longer hours than ever, returning only when the stars came out. His hands, rough and blistered, mirrored those of his children. When neighbors offered pity, he replied coldly, "My children may crawl, but they move faster than your hearts." Life in Hatay was survival, not comfort. The Ulas family lived at the edge of poverty. Their small plot of land yielded little. The able-bodied children fetched water and sold eggs in the market, while the 5 siblings who walked differently stayed close to home. But they were not helpless. Each of them found ways to move through the world. Sermon learned to cook, balancing on her knees by the fire. Hussein helped herd goats, crawling behind them across rocky ground with astonishing speed. Mustafa, the youngest, became the family's laughter, mischievous and bright, always the first to play. To outsiders they looked broken, but inside that small house there was dignity, quiet, unspoken, unyielding dignity. Still, the world around them did not forgive difference easily. The village children often mocked them. Once, when Safet tried to attend a local school, he returned home bloodied from stones thrown by other boys. That night, Hattis held his face and said, "You are not made wrong. You are made strong in another way." Those words became the family's anchor, a silent prayer repeated over decades. The 1980s arrived, but time in Hatay barely moved. Radios were rare, electricity came and went, and news of the outside world reached them only through travelers. The Ulas siblings grew older. Their muscles strengthened, their bodies adapted to the strange gait. They could balance themselves for a few seconds upright, but soon they would return to all fours. At night, they would sit under the stars, watching the silhouettes of birds crossing the moon. One day, Sermon whispered to her brothers, "We will stand as they fly." They laughed softly, not out of disbelief, but out of love. Their language evolved too, half Turkish, half gestures, half something entirely their own. They spoke with their eyes, their shoulders, their rhythm. When one laughed, the others joined instinctively. When one fell, all reached out a hand. Science would later describe their speech as primitive, but what the scientists never understood was that it was not primitive, it was pure. In 1998, the quiet life of the Ulas family was interrupted forever. A man named Dr. Tan, a neurophysiologist from Kukurova University, arrived at their door. He had heard strange rumors about a family that walks on all fours, and thought it a myth. But curiosity led him down the dirt roads of Hatay until at last he stood before the house. He expected to find exaggeration. Instead, he found truth. He watched as 4 adults and 1 teenager crossed the courtyard, hands and feet pressing the earth, their movements fluid and confident, their eyes meeting his without shame. For a moment, he could not breathe. Later, he would write in his journal, "It was as if I had stepped into a mirror that reflected our evolutionary past." Dr. Tan filmed their movements, spoke with the family, and studied their behavior for hours. He noticed something extraordinary. They didn't use their knuckles like apes, but their palms, maintaining balance with precise coordination. Their muscles had reshaped themselves. Their skeletons had adapted. He concluded that they suffered from a rare neurological condition, an inherited disorder that affected the cerebellum, the part of the brain controlling balance and coordination. He named it Tan syndrome. Soon other scientists came, British, American, German. Cameras followed. The Ulas' home, once hidden in silence, now filled with strangers, flashes, and whispers. To the world, they became a scientific curiosity, the family that walks on all fours, the missing link, the step between ape and man. But to the Ulas family, it was humiliation. When the first documentary aired, the villagers gathered around a single television in the square. On the screen, they saw their neighbors crawling, analyzed, discussed in foreign languages. Some laughed, others crossed themselves in fear. Hattis turned off the television halfway through. "They see animals," she said softly, "but I only see my children." In the following months, the family became more isolated. Children threw rocks at their home. Tourists drove through the village to catch a glimpse of the crawling people. Yet through it all, the siblings remained united. Safet, the eldest, would guide the others when reporters arrived. He spoke little Turkish, but he understood tone, and when people spoke with mockery, he turned his back and crawled away. That quiet dignity, that refusal to perform, was their only rebellion. The scientists debated endlessly. Some called it a genetic mutation, others a glimpse into evolution's mistakes. Dr. Tan theorized it was an example of reverse evolution, humans reverting to an earlier form of movement. The claim sparked outrage. Anthropologists argued, philosophers wrote essays, and talk shows used their images for shock value. But no one asked the family what they felt. Had they been asked, Hattis would have said, "My children do not walk backward. The world simply walks faster than they do." The label reverse evolution followed them everywhere. It reduced their humanity to a theory. But behind that label were 5 souls who never gave up, who laughed, worked, and lived despite a world that saw them as less. Amidst all the pain and misunderstanding, there were moments of breathtaking beauty. In the spring of 1996, after heavy rains, the fields near Hatay turned green for the first time in years. The 5 siblings went out together, their hands sinking into the soft, wet soil. They moved like a single body, synchronized, graceful. Birds rose from the reeds as they passed. Dr. Tan, who had returned for further study, watched in silence. They moved not with struggle, he wrote, but with rhythm, as if the earth itself teaches them balance. He began to see them differently, not as evidence of regression, but as evidence of adaptation. Evolution not in reverse, but sideways, finding another way to survive when balance fails. And in that realization lay the heart of the mystery. As the years drew to an end, Hattis's health began to fade. She would sit outside her home at dusk, her shawl drawn tightly, watching her children play. Once a journalist asked her what she wished for them. She replied, "I wish for the world to stop looking down at them. They already do that enough." When she passed away in late 1998, her children, both those who walked and those who crawled, buried her together on the hill overlooking the village. They laid flowers by her grave, their palms covered in earth. That night, Sermon whispered into the wind, "You walked ahead for us, Mother. Now we must learn to stand for you." By the end of 1998, the Ulas family had become known across the scientific world. Teams from Europe and America visited Haiti, but even as the world looked closer, few truly saw them. To the villagers, they remained the family that walked backward. To scientists, they were a case study. To the world, a spectacle, but to each other they were simply home. Every night when the lamps went out, they sat together by the faint glow of moonlight. They spoke in whispers, shared memories, and sometimes, only sometimes, tried to stand, just to see how far they could reach. Each attempt ended with a fall, but also with laughter. And that laughter, fragile, pure, defiant, echoed softly through the hills of Haiti. It was the sound of life refusing to bow. Science called them primitive, villagers called them cursed. But if walking on four limbs is a step backward, then loving without bitterness must surely be a step forward. In the silence of their small world, the Ulas family taught humanity something that can't be measured in laboratories: strength of surviving with grace when the world refuses to understand you. As the century turned and the world moved faster into modernity, the Ulas family remained still in Haiti, still misunderstood, still united. Their story was far from over, because what began as a disturbing mystery was slowly becoming a testament to the resilience of the human soul. The world had come and gone, leaving footprints on their soil and names they couldn't pronounce. When the film crews packed their equipment and the scientists returned to their universities, the Ulas family was left alone once more under the same broken roof, beside the same old well, facing a silence that now felt heavier than before. For the first time, the siblings understood what it meant to be seen but not understood. The villagers had changed too. Pity replaced curiosity, and pity, as Hattis once said before her passing, is the cruelest kindness. People whispered, "Poor creatures," but never offered a hand. Children were warned to stay away, so the five Safet, Sermon, Hussein, Sedi and Mustafa withdrew into their small world again. The older brothers worked in the fields. The sisters tended to the animals. They had no mirrors in the house, but they knew how the world saw them through eyes that measured difference before dignity, and yet something new had been planted in their hearts' awareness. The scientists' words had reached them in fragments through translators: cerebellum, mutation, evolution, reverse. They didn't understand the science, but they understood the tone. They were being studied like fossils. And that quiet realization that they were seen as something less than human awakened something powerful inside them, a seed of resistance. After their mother, Hattis, passed away, her absence became an ache that shaped their days. Her room remained untouched, her shawl still hanging on the wall. Every night, the siblings gathered there to pray, to talk, or simply to remember her voice. One evening, Sermon spoke for them all. "We can't live like this forever. Mother wouldn't want us to hide." The others nodded slowly. They didn't know how to change their fate, but they knew this. They had to try. And so began their quiet rebellion, one not of words, but of persistence. They started to challenge themselves. Sermon tried to stand a few seconds longer each morning, holding onto the wall until her knees trembled. Hussein began walking small distances between rooms, balancing with his hands against the walls. Mustafa, the youngest, took it as a game, racing his siblings to see who could stay upright the longest. Their efforts often ended in laughter, sometimes in pain, but every fall was followed by another attempt. It was not science, it was survival. One spring afternoon, a car appeared at the edge of the village, a rare sight that drew curious eyes. From it stepped a woman in a beige coat, carrying a notebook and a determination that would soon change everything. Her name was Dr. Emine Kara, a young physiotherapist who had watched the first documentary as a medical student years ago. Where others saw a medical anomaly, she had seen humans trapped inside the wrong kind of attention. When she reached the Ulas' home, the family hesitated to open the door. Outsiders had only brought shame before, but Emine sat down right there in the dirt and waited. When Sermon peeked through the curtain, Emine smiled and simply said, "I didn't come to study you, I came to learn from you." That sentence broke a silence that had lasted years. For days, she stayed, observing gently, no cameras, no commands, no notebooks in their faces. She ate what they ate, slept where they slept, and when she spoke, her tone carried no pity, only patience. Soon, she began small exercises, bending, balancing, breathing. She tied ropes between two posts in the courtyard, encouraging the siblings to grip them as they tried to stand. At first, they laughed at her, "We are fine like this." But Emine's warmth was disarming. Little by little, trust replaced fear. It was Usain who first succeeded. Under the afternoon sun, with Emine holding one arm and Sermon the other, he managed to straighten his back fully and take 3 small steps. His legs shook violently, but he didn't fall. The courtyard went silent. Even the goats nearby seemed to pause. Then a sudden cheer, a wild, joyous sound that echoed through the fields. Tears ran down Emine's face. "You see," she whispered, "the body remembers." That moment changed everything. Every morning before the call to prayer, the siblings gathered outside and practiced. The villagers began to notice. Some smiled for the first time. Others muttered that they were defying fate. But the Ulas family no longer cared what others said. They had discovered something far more powerful than explanation: hope. For the next 5 years, progress came inch by inch. Sermon, who once crawled silently, now walked several meters unaided. Hussein could balance long enough to carry a basket of fruit to the neighbor's house. Safet, the eldest, whose back had stiffened over decades, learned to rise briefly each day, his pride shining brighter than any scientist's report. The transformation was not only physical. The siblings began talking more, their speech clearer, their confidence growing. They began visiting the mosque, attending local gatherings, and even helping in the village market. The once feared backward family was becoming part of the world again. Still, the world beyond Hatay hadn't forgotten them. Documentaries resurfaced, this time framed as redemption stories, the family that walks on all fours a decade later. This time, when the cameras came, the Ulas family didn't hide. They stood not perfectly, but proudly, and let the world see how far they had come. When viewers across the world saw Sermon walking beside Emine, holding her hand, millions cried. For the first time, people didn't see animals or evolution. They saw human triumph. Not everyone celebrated. Some scientists criticized Dr. Emine harshly. They accused her of interfering with scientific data, claiming her involvement blurred the line between research and rehabilitation. Her reply was simple: "You studied their bodies, I studied their strength." But the criticism took a toll. Funding for her visits was withdrawn. Still, she returned on her own, using her savings to bring medicine, therapy tools, and shoes for the siblings. The villagers, once suspicious, now protected her. They called her the walking doctor, the woman who gave their family its second chance. And even as her resources dwindled, her bond with the Ulas family deepened. They had become her extended family, her proof that compassion could accomplish what science alone could not. Progress slowed. The siblings were aging. Their bodies, once adapted to the crawl, resisted change. Pain in their joints grew worse. Some days they couldn't stand at all, but they didn't stop trying. Mustafa, the youngest, began helping the others. He became their motivator, the heart of the house. One night during a storm, as wind howled through the cracks of their old home, he said, "Maybe the world will always see us as different, but at least now they will know we tried." "Doctor," Emine smiled sadly. "You did more than try, Mustafa. You changed what it means to fall." Outside, lightning illuminated the fields where they once crawled in shame. Inside, the family sat close, their shadows long on the walls, not broken but bonded. News crews returned once again, but this time the story was told differently. The documentary Rising Hands premiered on international television, portraying not the strangeness of the Ulas family, but their resilience. It showed Sermon walking upright for several seconds, her face glowing with joy. It showed Hussein feeding goats, Mustafa guiding his siblings, and Emine weeping quietly behind the camera. The narration ended with words that resonated worldwide. They were born crawling, but they taught us all how to stand. The response was overwhelming. Letters and donations flooded in. For the first time, the Ulas family had proper beds, medicine, and shoes that fit their feet. A small organization was even formed to support individuals with rare neurological disorders in rural Turkey in their name. The Ulas family, once symbols of regression, had become symbols of resilience. Over the next few years, researchers began to reinterpret their findings. What had once been labeled reverse evolution was now described as a unique adaptation, the body's ability to find balance despite neurological impairment. In conferences, the Ulas family's name appeared alongside new discussions about empathy, ethics, and the role of compassion in science. One neurologist summed it up best: the Ulas family did not walk backward in evolution, they moved forward in humanity. Meanwhile, Emine continued her visits. The siblings aged gracefully. Their faces carried deep lines, but their laughter was still childlike. When asked once how she managed to stay so hopeful, Sermon replied softly, "Because every time I fall, the ground reminds me I am still alive." Tragedy struck again when Safet, the eldest, passed away quietly one night. He had been the silent guardian of the family, the one who endured pain without complaint. His passing hit the family hard. For days, the house was filled with sobs. Mustafa placed his brother's walking stick near the window, a symbol, he said, of the road they had yet to finish. When Dr. Emine returned and saw it, she whispered, "Then we will walk it for him." From that day, every step they took, every moment upright, was a tribute to Safet. The world may have forgotten his name, but the family carried it like a torch. In 2022, a new documentary, this time Turkish-made, premiered under the title Ulas, the family that taught us to stand. Unlike the early films, this one was intimate. It didn't open with crawling bodies or scientific commentary. It began with a quiet shot of Sermon lighting a candle under her mother's photograph and whispering, "We are walking now, Anne." The film ended with Mustafa standing unsteadily, tears in his eyes, saying, "They said we were proof humans never evolved, but maybe we are proof that kindness still can." It became one of the most watched human interest documentaries of the year, celebrated for transforming a dark medical mystery into a story of hope and dignity. Today, the surviving Ulas siblings live quietly in the same village. They are older, slower, but not forgotten. Their story is taught in medical ethics classes across universities as a reminder that observation without empathy is blindness. Dr. Emine, now older herself, still visits. She doesn't come with cameras or equipment anymore. She comes with bread, with stories, with laughter. Sometimes she finds them sitting under the old fig tree where they once practiced walking. Mustafa still likes to joke, "We'll run someday," to which Emine always replies, "You already did," because in their struggle, the Ulas family achieved what few humans ever do. They changed the meaning of strength. They proved that evolution is not measured in bones or brain scans, but in the will to keep rising again and again, no matter how many times the world calls you broken. Evolution is not about changing form, it's about finding strength in what you are. The Ulas family didn't remind us of our past, they reminded us of our potential. When science met compassion, the impossible took its first step.